right. So if people actually got to hear the conversation before we started recording, they'd know they should tune in again in a year or so for whatever that business ends up becoming. But the podcast today is with an old friend of mine, Steve Krull, the CEO of Be Found Online out in Chicago. It's a remote podcast this time, so he's way over across the interwebs, and we're still looking at each other, though, thanks to modern technology. So, Steve, I obviously know enough about BFO and have known you for a long time, but let's just start with what is BFO? What do you guys do at Be Found Online?
BFO is a best-in-class demand generation agency. In short, what we do is we bring quality traffic to your digital web properties. So your website, be it an app, whatever it is you need to do. If it's social, bring it to a landing page in social or your social profiles. We are very, very good at driving traffic, high-quality traffic.
What I've noticed about working with you over the years and alongside you as well as with you with clients is something I think is different than the typical agency, and that you guys actually do care about delivering and you care about making things right with clients and relationships, as opposed to, but we did the transaction happened, so why are we still talking? Which becomes the way of a lot of agencies, and I'm sure you've seen that over time. Why is BFO that way? When it seems like most agencies get into they all claim to be people focused, but they end up being metric focused and just grinding the granular data.
You've tapped on the hardest thing that we face on a day-to-day basis in terms of differentiating ourselves as an agency, because you can talk a good game. You can say, we're going to manage your budgets better than anybody on the planet, and we're going to give you exceptional customer service. It's hard to walk both those lines, for one, and it's really hard to differentiate for another. When you walk into a room with the executives of a company who are looking for a new agency, and they say, how are you different? Well, arguably I'm just like 10,000 other agencies that you could talk to today. Right. So it's a really hyper competitive space in that regard. We like to bring our reputation into that and say, you know what, we truly do deliver customer experience. We truly do care about our clients. And we've got a ton of longstanding relationships with clients, and relationships that are 7 years or more with clients, which is a testament to how much we really care about our clients and how much we care about those relationships.
Where does that come from, though? The difference in the agency culture and the caring?
I think it comes from Dan having grown up in an agency and understanding sort of how agencies turn and churn. And then Dan is my partner for folks listening at home. But it's growing up in agency life and seeing the turnover and seeing how junior teams get assigned to accounts. And you bring in the person who's been out of school for 6 months and they're now leading a 7-figure account just because we have a playbook and we taught Jimmy how to run the plays, or we taught Susie how to run the plays. We don't believe in that from that regard. It's like you always get experience with BFO. You get people with years of experience, sometimes over a decade of experience managing your account, because they've been there and they've seen it. The other side of it is I've been in operations my whole life. And before that, I was in customer service. So it's always coming to realize that customer service is nearly as important as the product. And if you can't bring the performance and the service together, then your relationships aren't going to last. If one or the other, I always use the example of a good friend of mine, Nick Cirillo, used to own several very large pizza places here in Chicago. And now he's doing leadership consulting and coaching and training in restaurants. But I always liken BFO to a pizza place. And here's my analogy is that, so if the food is amazing and the service stinks, what are you going to do? You're going to say, I might give him a second chance because the food was really, really good. But man, that guy Adam who was serving me, was he a tool? Or the restaurant was horrible. Now flip this, right? Service is great and the food stinks. You're not going back.
No.
You're like, wow, that guy Adam was the best. He was really nice. He asked me a bunch of questions. Got the chatty. Now both of them are great. What are you going to do? You're going to tell people about it.
Yep.
If both of them suck,
you're going to tell people about it. Yeah, different story.
So if you can get both of these things at a high level, you're going to become well known or better known, and your reputation is going to precede you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you started to mention what you're doing before BFO. What were you doing before the business was formed?
Just I was in tech operations. I used to build networks. I used to build websites. I used to build out data centers. I grew up making computers talk to each other. I built some of the first local area networks at what used to be First Chicago Bank. There's a buddy of mine and I who still thumb wrestle over building local area networks. But really, we were sort of the second wave because there were the old guard there who were interconnecting buildings before we ever got a chance to build networks. But we were early days, cutting edge client server technology, building out Novell and Microsoft networks way back when. It wasn't just pull it out of a box and plug it in.
And did you own that, or were you working for someone else at the time?
I was working for the bank at the time, and then I jumped onto the .com bandwagon in '99.
I did that too, way back.
way back. It was a short-lived startup, and that lasted about a year. I've got some stock options as wallpaper somewhere. I don't know where they're at these days. That was a company that collected $90 million in venture capital, never once turned a dime, and was out of business in 2 years.
The one I worked for was similar, and I remember the CEO looked like Hulk Hogan. He would come in. Uh-huh. He was based out in I think San Francisco, and we were here in Boston area, and he would fly in every once in a while and drive up in his Porsche, and he would get out and you'd be in middle of winter in New England. He's in shorts. He's got like the flowy 60-year-old blonde hair, super tan, gigantic, and he's in shorts. I mean, literally, he looked like Hulk Hogan was running the company. It was just so bizarre to see him come sweep through and then leave. And there was a lot of VC interest in the company and a bunch of investments that ended up that a lot of that money went to nice offices and rental Porsches for executives while traveling. And then there was no more company.
I once turned down a job with equity going to work for a friend of mine who had gotten a bit of venture backing to start something, and he offered me a percentage and a salary. And having been through that once, I did the math with him, and he said, "Well, I'll give you 5% equity." I said, 5% of top line or 5% of bottom line? I said, because you're not giving me real equity. I said, you're giving me phantom equity. He said, well, yeah. I said, so is it top line or bottom line? And he told me it was bottom line. And I said, no. And he said, well, why not? I said, because I have no control over you leasing another Porsche, because he had leased a Porsche.
Yeah, funny, right?
I have zero control over that. What is that? $700-800 a month sitting out front? I said, and I have no control over that leading to my 5% of a bonus.
Right.
No. How about no? He's like, well, what do you mean? What can I do differently? Well, you can give me real equity or real control, or a lot more money, because this equity isn't going to be worth anything if you keep leasing Porsches.
Right. It's funny how that happens so much.
Well, that was early days that was pre-BFO. In my days after internet, went to middle America, did a web startup within an organization that was spun off to How Stuff Works. And it was at that point that I became liberated from that role after the acquisition. And I started what I call this wonderful mess. And early days of that was when I ran into this buddy who had been funded. And needless to say, we're not really friends anymore because he ran his company and ran it into the ground despite wanting to hire me. And the salary wasn't bad. And he wanted to give me some equity. And I told him he was crazy. And then he started bouncing checks.
Oh, no.
I said, are you kidding me? Here I am trying to pay my mortgage, and not only bouncing checks, giving me bad checks, my friend.
No.
3 times gave me bad checks.
Willingly giving you bad checks.
And I'm trying to pay my mortgage while he's spending somebody else's money.
Yeah.
And he's bouncing checks. It's funny because I had a friend in banking and he gave me a bad check. And I knew it was a bad check because I'd been in banking, but he gave it to me in a social setting where it wasn't appropriate for me to stare at the check.
Yeah.
It was a very somber event, and I just sort of had to put it in my pocket.
So he was calculated in when he gave it to you?
Oh, it's horse shit, my friend. And so the business lesson in there is get cash when you can.
Yeah.
And if somebody's going to hand you a check, stare at it. Make sure the written amount and the dollar amount are the same. Sure the it's not post dated. make sure they sign it. Oh, it's a crazy number of things people can do to screw up a check. I know we don't use them a lot anymore, but if you get one, check it.
Yeah, I don't think I know much about that. I wouldn't even know what to look for. I would look for it to be signed, I guess. If the written amount is different than the numeric amount, then they won't cash it, or it's a bogus check?
They won't cash it.
Yeah.
They won't
makes
cash
sense,
it.
right? They shouldn't.
If it's post dated in the future, they won't cash it. So it was a couple times that one bounced, then he gave me one bad check, then he gave me another bad check. And the last time he gave me a bad check, I had an ace up my sleeve, because I had a friend who was a manager at a bank, and at the bank that the check was drawn on. And I called her and said, "Hey, I got this bad check." She said, "I can deposit it for you."
Nice.
And she did me a solid and said, "Hey, I'll check once a week and see when his account has enough money to cash it."
Yeah. The inside track on the funds. That's lucky though.
Oh, very lucky. Very lucky. And then at the end of the deal, he still owed me $1,500. And there was a point in time where he messaged me on Facebook and threatened to pay me the $1,500. And I told him to give it to his favorite charity. And I gave him a list of my favorite charities, because I never thought I'd see the money.
Yeah. And you almost don't want to even reignite those type of relationships. They go away for a reason. And bringing that back in, opening the door to a chronic, liar or a chronic failure, then it's, what you're doing. It's your fault if you let them back in. Those are the kind of people you have to get rid of.
Absolutely. I call it, there's people in life and in business, there are weasels and useful weasels.
That's true. That's true. I'd like to think there's more categories than just weasels and useful weasels in business.
Well, no, there absolutely are. I'm just saying at the bottommost layer.
At the weasel level.
At the weasel level, it's a very low level of people. And they might be nice enough people, but you're like, you're a weasel. A useful weasel is somebody that actually writes you good checks and pays you for your work, where a weasel is somebody that just either keeps talking and trying to drag you into doing work for free, or they really make themselves a weasel when you do the work and their checks bounce.
Right. You got to look at, too, when you're judging the weasel. Are they a weasel by nature, or are they a weasel by their job? Like, does their job create the weaselness, or are they born a weasel? Because if they're born a weasel, it's hopeless. They're just always running a scam. They're always trying to screw you, and you just got to get rid of the weasel.
So it's like the used car salesman stereotype, right?
Yep, 100%.
It's that guy,
Yep.
Sharky, they call him.
Hey, let me put you right in this thing over here.
His environment turned him into a weasel. He wasn't born a weasel.
Right. He just has to be a weasel to turn his tricks. Thought that might not be the right thing to say. But anyway, that's true about the weasels. There are multiple different types of weasels. And that's the thing that sucks in business is salespeople all get lumped in as weasels, especially like me or you as owners. We get approached every day by somebody wanting to sell you something. And a lot of those people are perfectly good people who have a perfectly good job trying to sell what their job is to sell. But, and you and I both have to step into the sales role as well and do that for our business. But as well as I do that 90% of the time, even if you think I should give someone the benefit of the doubt, since I'm in that place a lot, you shut down all sales efforts. At least I do. Their emails aren't, I'm not responding to them. I'm not taking the calls. It's just, I'm not in the market.
I think you're right. And I don't want to unfairly label everybody weasels.
I agree.
Realistically, there are very few weasels out there. Most people are good at what they do and just trying hard at things. I had a client of ours say to somebody on our team recently, she said, I really like Steve. Of anybody who's ever tried to sell me something, he's the only one I didn't want to punch in the face.
Well, that's nice. That's
a wonderful compliment.
By the way, just to be clear, I agree. I think most people in a sales role are good people, and they probably have something they can add to your day or to your life should you be in the market for their service. But they all immediately, until proven otherwise, get that label. I would say, it's like a prejudice. It's the salespeople, because so many before them, and even if it's a minority, have earned the weasel badge. they all have to fight off the weasel badge. Just like us in marketing, you start as a weasel and you have to earn the non-weasel tag because you're a marketer. You're obviously a weasel.
So let me ask you a question. How do you flip that? How do you become the non-weasel? How do you engage in sales, and how do you earn the trust of the people that you're selling to?
It's a really good ongoing question that I would say I have a lot of different things I try, and I don't have any answers. I don't have the magic bullet. I try to, rather than, but we're really niche based too. So I try to become personal before I try to sell anything. So even on the level of someone I haven't met yet, rather than sending them a bunch of emails or time-triggered emails where I'm following up on the last thing I said, expecting them not to answer, saying, you must be too busy to read my email. Well, let me, and I don't do that. What it drives me out of my mind.
I get those texts from you. What are you, too good for me now? What's my response?
Well, that's true, but that's different. I try to do the best thing I can figure out to date to start a personal relationship, and that's I make a video where like you'll see me just like you see me here, and I'll talk about their business, their website, or some story about something they're doing. Clearly, I know who they are. I've looked into them. I have an idea on how I can help, even though I know my idea might be flawed because I haven't spoken to them yet. And I just say as much. And I make a video where they can see me and I talk about them and how I think I can help, where I think I'd like to help, and I'd love to have the next conversation. And basically, so I start it with a conversation, even though the conversation's one-sided. And sending those videos through email, I get a pretty good click rate, and people look at it because I think 90% of it is curiosity. They haven't seen a video embedded in email come through with some random guy's face there, and their website. You know, I show what I'm talking about them, and that's what I try. But you guys are bigger than we are. How do you deal with it? How do you cross the weasel line?
Well, there's two things in there I want to talk to. I want to talk about that weasel line, but I also want to talk about video and sort of the growth of video. Let's go weasel first if we come back to the growth of video, because I really want to get your opinion, because you do a ton of video and you're seeing the emergence of it. Crossing the weasel line is the same thing. It's relationship based selling. It's earning trust before you ever try and sell something.
Yeah.
I recently had an opportunity with a client, and she and I were simply talking, and she knew my background, and she said that they had hosed their website, and they said, we know it's not getting the traffic. It's a job placement company. We know it's not getting the traffic it should. Yes, we know we compete against the monsters and the ladders and everybody else in the world who has jobs on their website. Right. But we're very niche, and we used to drive traffic, and we built this site for all of our listings, and it's not driving traffic. She said, I got a couple of quotes. One company told me that I needed to fix the website and rebuild it before they'd even look at it. And the other company gave me a quote, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, so I'm having trouble with it. And I simply said, as a courtesy, I'm happy to spend a little time on the website and let you know what I think. Just because she became a friend,
right?
And it was easy. It's easy enough to do. And why not lend my expertise? And I told her, I said, listen, I'm going to send you this, and I'm not putting a price in it. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just want to tell you what the deal is with your website. And I told her, I said, well, the guy who told you to rebuild the website immediately before he'd touch it is crazy. I said, yes, it has some challenges, but they can certainly be addressed. Here are a few of the things that we saw. And this is our 20,000 foot view. This is not our 5 foot detailed site audit. This is just me kicking around in a few tools and asking one of the more technical people on the team for some feedback, sent her the stuff, and immediately the trust door opened a crack. And I wasn't really trying to push it open. I just knew that if I went in and did the right thing, that she would either just lean on me for advice. I said, the worst thing is you're getting free advice.
Yeah. And she tells someone else about this guy that helped her. I mean, there's nothing, it always pays off. Goodwill pays off. And
that's what I was doing, was trying to be a good friend. And what it's led to is a contract for next year.
That's great. Yeah. It's a win-win.
Yeah, a win-win. So the same thing for getting past the weasel part of it. We've brainwashed ourselves with Skip Miller's proactive selling here,
Mm-hmm.
and the buyers buy backwards. And as a seller, you need to stay in control, but respectful control of the sales process,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding where your buyer is, and using some of the tools. But it's all about the relationship. You're not trying to, and it's all about them too, because they have a problem to solve. I used to, and I know you've done it too, but somebody used to say, "Hey, Steve, we've got a problem with our website, or we've got a problem with our online advertising. Can you help?" Yeah, sure. Quick conversation. They'd say, "Well, can you send me something?" And build out this PowerPoint deck of, I always like to say 437 slides, but it's never quite that long. But you build out the deck, and it shows everything that we can do, and talks about me.
Right.
I used to call it MeFO when we did that. And you send them something, and you have zero idea if you've even gotten close to the mark, because I never knew what their problem was. I never knew what their goal was. So how am I going to help them meet their goals or solve their problem if all I'm doing is talking about me and all of the wonderful, amazing services we offer?
It's the ego first thing in our industry, where we think we know the right thing, where we don't even know what you do. We haven't even spoken to you who run the business. It happens. And that's, I think we've talked about it before, but I'm the same way, and it freaks people out when they're new on the team and we're going to go pitch, and they're used to, or they come from an agency background, and we're going to go pitch some company, and they want to get the deck all together and get ready to who's going to pitch what. And when I say we're not bringing a deck, we're going to the meeting and we're going to ask questions, and everyone else is going to bring a deck and pitch. We might lose the business, we might win the business, but we're not going to win it on being so arrogant that we think we know the answer before anyone told us what the problem is.
So one of the books that I want to throw in here that speaks about consultative selling is Patrick Lencioni's Getting Naked.
Getting Naked.
Naked.
Is that like Tommy Lee's song, Get Naked?
Absolutely. Lencioni's book talks about two different consulting agencies, one that's very highly regarded and one that's big and stuffy. And certainly he draws those contrasts to make part of the book. But he goes into this consultative selling approach. And when I read the book for the first time after it was recommended to me, I realized that that's who I was. People like somebody that comes at it honestly. They want to have a conversation. I don't know that I'm ever looking to sell you something unless you asked me to sell you something. But even when you ask me to sell you something, I'm still breaking back into my sales process.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to understand, and and I hate to say checking boxes, but if I don't know where I am in that process, I don't believe that I can help you to the best of my abilities, and to put a solution in place that's going to address your challenges as effectively as they could. And Skip Miller calls it, picking your train. The person you're talking to generally has a lot more going on than just what they're trying to contract with you for. They're overseeing a website, they're overseeing marketing, they're overseeing traditional marketing, out of home, digital. They've got some other things going. Then they might be overseeing sales and marketing as well. I'm just the engineer. They're the engineer of one of those trains.
Yep.
I got to be their conductor for that. So here's my little piece of that. But am I identifying the right train in their problem set? They might come to me banging down the door that says, "We really need to get into the paid social advertising. We're not there. We need to be there." We look at all their stuff. Now I can run and sell you paid social. Great. May or may not work, but I'm doing you a disservice if I don't take the time to ask you a bunch of questions about the rest of your business.
Definitely.
And to identify the best train to be on.
Right, because odds are selling them some paid search is going to work to some degree at something, regardless, even if it's the wrong answer. But is it going to work as well as the right answer for that business and that particular challenge and whatever they're, So you have to ask the questions. That's why we don't do RFPs. We don't respond to them unless there's a meeting ahead of time where we can really vet out what we want to know before answering it. But in general, if we get an option to participate in an RFP, we just, no thanks. We're not interested. I want to talk. I want to have organic discussions with someone who's got a need that we can legitimately help with, or else, thanks, but no thanks. Here's someone else I think can help you. Here's someone else I think can help you. I just don't like to chase work for the sake of work anymore. I want to do work that, and it's not it's not that I'm not hungry, but I want to do work that's going to be good work that's going to help, build everybody forward. Not going to be. I would feel like it was a scam if I just sold you something just to sell it to
Hmm.
you because you wanted to buy
Well,
something.
well, you touched on the RFP process, and we struggle with RFPs. I think we tend to respond to more RFPs than we should. It's hard to say no because you think you can help solve a problem. But companies either use the RFP process because they think they should,
Right.
or they use it to sterilize the competition.
Right.
We're gonna homogenize everything here by giving you 37 very vanilla questions and hope you strike a chord with us. And then if you answer those well, we're going to take you to the next round, and then we're going to take you to the final round. It's always this weird thing. And generally our rule is that if we're invited by somebody we know and have a lot of respect for, then we will generally participate. Otherwise, we will politely say, no, thank you.
Yeah.
But sort of similar to you got to evaluate it
Well,
on a case by case.
what I don't like about it is you can put all that work into answering the questions to the best of your ability, and RFPs take a lot of time for anyone out there whose business doesn't involve RFPs. It's a big document. It's an ask for a particular project in the marketing world where you've got to answer all of these detailed questions about how you would handle the project. You normally, or at least sometimes, having never spoken to the potential client about the project. But what I don't like is you have to include a price in the RFP. And most people reviewing
Yeah.
RFPs, they take the bottom, they take the top, they throw it away. But you, as the business pricing the RFP, you don't really know where to be. You're nervous that you're going to be too high. You're nervous that you're going to be too low, or you're leaving something on the table. You can't even focus on getting the right work and creating the right proposal because you're focused so much on, is this bottom line, last page, going to get us thrown up before they even read all the work that I'm doing? And that's where I just end up negative, not doing it.
I'm gonna play up one more level on that in terms of the RFPs, and you're doing your responses and you're chasing that game, and you don't know the people that you're responding to. Sometimes you don't get a conversation, but I will say, for other folks listening, you say, I don't know, RFPs are okay. There is an art and a science to RFPs. There are companies that make a handsome living because they respond to RFPs, because they show up well and have a system for responding to and representing themselves in response to RFPs. And all they
100%.
do is respond to RFPs and they make a handsome living at it. You and I, my friend, I just don't think we've cracked the code or
Yeah,
want to.
100%. Well, yeah, and there's accountants, and there's actors, and there's marketers, and there's firemen. It takes different types. I'm not saying that RFPs are bad. I'm saying we don't do them for those reasons because a lot of people, even in similar jobs to ours that are in marketing focused careers, some are transactional, some are personal. I mean, it depends on the way the business is run. Where mine, we don't even sell a product. We don't sell search, or we don't sell websites, or we don't sell video. We sell what we sell strategy, and what comes out of the strategy, then we help you to build whatever it might be. So we want to talk first and foremost about, what do you even do? Why are we here? Why are you and I having a conversation? What led us here? What's the impetus? And we talk about the whys and the hows, and then we'll get into, well, what do we want to do? What do we want to implement? And then if we can build it, if it's web or video or content or any of that sort of stuff, or if we want to pass it off, if it's SEO or if it's ads or if it's something that we don't really get into and do, then we'll pass it off. But for the way that we operate, that has to happen first. The conversation that has to happen first.
Yeah, and that's actually, if you go back, I can't recommend Lencioni's book enough there for people that want to do consultative selling and relationship based selling, because it breaks it down into such terms as that your first meeting with a client isn't about selling something. It's about getting to know the client, establishing some rapport with the client, and learning about their business. I need to be educated on your business before I can ever begin to think that I help you make some numbers.
And that goes for anything, whether you're selling cookies or marketing or cars. You have to understand who you're selling to and why. But I want to take you back to the days where you were in between jumping to an internet startup, and then BFO. What was the process like in going from, so you went from a bank to a startup, internet startup, and then from there to BFO? You got the bug?
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I want to understand more. I want you to kind of take me through, how long was it when you had the thought of doing your own thing until it came to be? And like, what was that journey? I don't want to say journey and sound like I'm some.
No. Let me go. Let me start answering.
Yeah, good. You talk.
I'll save you from the question. I had I've been a closet entrepreneur my whole life, moonlighting, starting businesses, made a few bucks, lost a few bucks, had some great ideas that never went anywhere. Had a financial advisor tell me once, ask me once, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? I said, because I want to have more control over my future. I want to be able to do things. I want to see my ideas come to life instead of always executing against somebody else's ideas. And he told me, he said, but you've got a perfectly comfortable middle management job and you continue to be promoted and things like that. Why would you give that up? I said, opportunity. And he said, so you're an entrepreneur? I said, no, I'm not an entrepreneur until I actually do something.
Yeah.
And it was always moonlight stuff. And there were some great ideas. In fact, I've still got a CD, if you will. It's not even a DVD. It's a CD of a company of mine from years and years ago that in many ways is the motivation for building things, because it was a great idea. It was a little bit before its time. We goofed up a little bit on how the company was set up, and we missed the window. There's a company in that industry now who was our competition way back when. I don't even know what year it was, but there was a company that we saw as our competition that just sold out to like CBS for $140 million.
Wow.
and we were there competing with them back then. And it's one of those where you let yourself get caught up in this internal thing of what you should build and who's building what, and the struggle of running a company, and you forget about where the market's going and what it's doing and how to get to the market.
Yeah, you're stuck inside.
And it was horrible. And that CD is simply a reminder for me of seeing things through and making it go. So I'd always been a closet entrepreneur, and was always moonlighting, always looking for something. Maybe it's just the day jobs weren't satisfied. There were years I went through day jobs looking for a good mentor. I hadn't had a good mentor since '99. A boss or a superior that kind of just somebody to look out for you.
Yeah.
Somebody to tell you, hey, Steve, you might want to go straight and to make it instead of making the left there, and willing to answer the question appreciatively. So I was searching. I didn't have anybody, and I just said, I'm going to be my own mentor. And that was in my last day job. And then when I was liberated in 2006, it was the question of, I had fallen in love with search and digital marketing by then. I knew it was a passion. I also had a passion for people. I was also very good at technology. And I had a choice to make. And that choice was go get the next job in technology, be it managing developers, managing data centers, managing technology of some sort, overseeing a website, whatever the case would be, or chasing this search thing, which I had just become really, really passionate about. So as stories go, I don't know that I set out to start a company. I think the decision points along, and I always knew I was an entrepreneur, but I don't know that I set out to start a company, because I had a 4 and a 6-year-old at home, and one of them had special needs, which anybody who has a child with special needs, it costs you a lot of money. And so there's this.
Well, it costs you a lot. It's not just money, right? I mean, it costs you a lot of mental power,
thank you for
emotion.
saying that.
It's a
so true.
It's an expensive proposition, and that's why it can be so rewarding or so difficult. And a lot of that depends on the way you anchor yourself around that. This is an issue that you've got now.
Very well said. Thank you for expanding on that. It was also part of my motivation for starting my own thing, which seems crazy because I traded what would have been like a salary up here, but job satisfaction here.
Yeah.
Back to the pizza example, I flipped it. I started my own agency with zero agency experience. I went from a lot of money to zero and very little job satisfaction to a ton of job satisfaction.
This is the best.
And it was awesome. And then I started and I started networking and just started trying to find opportunity, and I kept splitting my horizons. I kept looking for a job at the same time I was trying to find new customers. Mm-hmm. And there was a point that I had, I call them conversations on the kitchen floor, where if my wife and I were sitting on the kitchen floor across from each other, you knew we were having a really, really serious conversation, and that we had to stay on the kitchen floor effectively until we found our way through it. And a lot of kitchen floor conversations were about my finding a job and giving up on business. And then you continue to build that little thing. And like, it started out counting clients as mortgage payments. How many mortgage payments is this?
Definitely.
And then you start thinking about, okay, when can I start paying myself a salary? When can I stop using short-term debt to fund my life because my business isn't paying enough?
Mm-hmm.
And when can I pay that back? And I went through all of those stages, and fortunately enough, came out the other side.
And let's not forget, am I crazy for wanting to do this? Should I just be getting a job like everybody else and doing the normal thing and having the safe route? Should I be doing that? Am I screwing up? Am I sticking to it too long? They always talk about knowing when to quit. Who's that guy? Do I not know when to quit, or do I? Should I stick to it? There's so much inner monologue that goes through your head on a daily basis, especially
it's crazy
in the beginning, or when times get tough, which they inevitably will. Even if you do great for a number of years, you end up with a bad year, and that bad year brings you right back to that kitchen floor. And what am I doing?
And it never ends, but you get used to the challenges and used to the risks.
Definitely.
And one of the best lessons I've had in the last year was, don't make decisions for your $6 million company like you would for your $1 million company. And it made me realize and reflect that a collective, but I'll also say me, take responsibility of making very narrow decisions for that company and not for this company. Mm-hmm. So that company, in many ways, was focused on survival and growth. This one's focused on growth and survival. They need to flip, and I had them backwards a little bit. And when you operate out of fear, as you know this, you've already given up some advantage. Definitely. You've already taken yourself out of the game.
Yep. You're acting like you're operating on borrowed time already, which is just a bad place to start from.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and again, being an entrepreneur is all about taking risks. You calculate the risks, but if you spend too much time calculating, the opportunities passed.
Yes. So did you meet Dan in between the .com job and the getting addicted to SEO and wanting to start the agency thing, or did you start it before you met Dan? I don't actually know that origin story.
So the way it works out, I met Dan during that bridge day job after my banking life. After banking went to .com, went to Middle America. Uh-huh. I met Dan in Middle America.
Okay.
He came aboard as an intern at that company, and his jobs, and you should get his story because he had 2 job offers. One was an intern at this little publishing company, and the other was to work at a cigar store, and he loves his cigars. So he almost took the cigar store job. And now I count Dan probably among the top 10 minds in paid search, mm-hmm. paid marketing, paid media. What word am I looking for? Paid media. So across paid search, paid social, programmatic advertising, Dan is absolutely one of the top 10 brains, and he's done a ton of work now in voice search, and it's just amazing. I don't know what the cigar industry would look like as a result of Dan being there, but It would be better off. It'd be better off for his presence. But anyway, we met there. And then in 2006, when it's about 3 or 4 months when I was looking for a job or deciding to start a business, mm-hmm. and the search jobs didn't pay a whole lot. They presented some opportunity. Technology jobs paid a lot more, but I didn't want to be in tech anymore.
Yeah.
So instead of taking a search job for 2/3 or half of what I wanted, I built an agency with zero salary instead. Seemed like a good idea at the time.
Yeah, sounds good.
But really, that's what you have to do, right? You've got to take away the net. You've got to know that you can go up, and you've got to take the risk, and you've got to be hungry for it. If you do it and you're not hungry, then you're not going to get there, especially if you're bootstrapping. I mean, I put everything on the line. I put my house on the line. I put my family on the line.
Yep.
And I asked for their support. If it wasn't for my wife's support from the start, I wouldn't have done it.
Oh, definitely. I feel the same. And I think that it's important to to understand that, because I would say most businesses are bootstrapped, right? You hear about the angel fundings and the Silicon Valley companies and the Facebooks
And my
and the Googles.
unicorns.
Right. The unicorns are called that because that's what they are, and that's not the norm. And the normal business that somebody goes out and starts, they're doing it with their own savings. They're doing it, forget paycheck to paycheck. They got to make a sale to bring money in to try to cover some bills. And they're, using their own credit cards or their own loans from a bank, and it's really all on their back. Or in your case, you have a partner, and I'm really curious about how that comes to be. Do you guys form the business together as partners? And then that's a dynamic that I'm not entirely familiar with, but I want to get into the partnership between you and Dan, and I want to take that through the way I know that you lead, and you always have, and you've ended up making a name, and you do some speeches around leadership and some writing about leadership, and you. In my world, it's been a very unique perspective to learn about your marketing, and you guys call it unleadership, I think. And you really have a different way, and you're way better at people than me, at caring about all the people. So I want to talk about, but I want to start from a partnership, starting a business with somebody else, and how long does it take from you and Dan, the crazy intern? Was he dressed in orange?
Probably. It's a long time ago.
I want to talk about just how does that come to be, to do it with a partner? It seems like a different path.
So what's crazy is I told you about the CD that's in my drawer and that failed partnership. And I thought to myself, partnerships are awful. Why would I ever do that again? And I went about my way in the summer of 2006, hung the shingle and said, I'm here, buy from me. I've never sold a thing in my life. I knew I was good at what I did. I had this delusion that if I could simply do 30 hours of work a week, I forget what I considered my rate was. If I could bill for 30 hours a week, that'd be great. But I never wanted to be an independent consultant. I always knew I wanted to work with other people and I wanted to grow. But I thought in those early days, if I could just do 30 hours a week. Well, I didn't know that I had to sell and market, network. I had to do accounting and such. So along the way,
and those take hours.
Time you don't have.
All the hours.
And so went out and about, started doing my thing, picked up a couple of clients here and there. In fact, a job that I turned down in Madison, Wisconsin, sent me my first customer, which I thought was amazing.
That's
it was
great.
Really, really cool of them. And it was a wonderful opportunity for me. And it kickstarted the thing. And I came to realize, so that was 2006-ish. And I started on my way. I was lone and solo. 2007 is when people started referring business to me. They want to see if you're actually going to do it or if you're just screwing around. Mm-hmm. So your friends who have opportunities that they can send your way, as much as they're your friends and they love and respect you, most of them will not send opportunities right away. I had two really cool favors come in, if you will. We'll call them favors, opportunities. One was that company I didn't go to work for. Mm-hmm. They sent me my first customer. And then there was a good friend of mine who started a web dev agency who knocked on my door and said, hey, you're doing search. We need it. Do you want to do it for our customers? Let's figure out a rate and let's put you to work. And he gave me a couple of customers. We had a wonderful relationship for many, many years. We're still friends. They've moved in a little bit different direction. They've got some folks in-house now and some other things. So it's still a great relationship, but we don't do work for them. Uh-huh. But he gave me that olive branch. He gave me that lift up to help me get started. And we did some great work together and that started building. And then along the way, what happened is I was SEO and web strategy. So I could tell you how to build a website and what to build. And I could help you optimize your website. I didn't do paid search or paid media. And I kept running into opportunities for paid media. Well, in comes Dan. So Dan's a paid media guru. Mm-hmm. And he had a day job at the time. But Dan turned out, I started farming work to Dan initially. It turns out Dan was the best moonlighter I ever worked with. And I'm sure you've used people who you're using part-time or they're working in the evenings. They're hit or miss. Yep. Whether or not they're going to deliver. Other things are more important. They don't need your money all the time.
Right.
Dan was the best.
Sometimes you can tell when they do.
Right. Dan would stay up to 3:00 in the morning to deliver stuff. And we started sharing opportunities because he was moonlighting too separately. So he'd have an opportunity for some SEO work.
Yeah.
And we started mixing opportunities. I hired somebody part-time. My wife was doing my books at the time. Dan was off doing his thing, and we started mixing these things. Then we had an opportunity where we were asked to pitch a very large client from a relationship that Dan had. And we met at Dan's apartment at 11 o'clock at night. We put a bunch of ideas in. We pulled together slides for a deck, sent the slides over. Presentation was made to the client, and they picked a couple of our ideas. And we stared at each other and said, how are we going to service this? What are we going to do?
Now what?
And that contract was signed 4 to 6 months before BFO was ever a company.
Huh.
That became the catalyst. We looked at each other and said, well, we've been sharing opportunities, been sharing resources, sharing work. We've never shared any money. Maybe we should just put all of this into the same cookie jar. So that was 10 years ago. That was January 1 of 2009. We threw it all into the cookie jar. We looked at the accounting and said, does that number look good? Yeah, it looks good. Okay, let's start a company.
Off to the races.
Off to the races. And that's how we got our start. And 10 years later, as a partnership, we have our challenges. There's no doubt. Everybody does. It's a bit of a marriage. But you gotta be open and honest, vulnerable, and be able to work through stuff.
Sure. And I would imagine that, so you guys have grown over the 10 years from a scrappy little pull together a deck in your apartment to having staff and an office and servicing many clients, and time passes, right? And time is a big thing because you change as a person. And so I would imagine that the partnership is very different than it was 10 years ago, where you and Dan have both become more mature versions of your former selves and have different interests and different people. So that's one thing I think that comes up all the time that people don't get when they haven't started a business. At least I've met a lot of people that want to be entrepreneurs, right? That's openly stated. And they spend a tremendous amount of time business planning and getting ready and formulating exactly what the business is. And the one thing I know for sure about starting a business is in a year, it's not going to be the same business. Yep. Things change, and you have to be more fluid. So, I know what that ride is like. I just can't imagine what it's like with another person, that you're equally reliant on as yourself through all those changes, but they're not going through the same changes.
It's interesting when you have to set direction and make decisions for the business, because there are times when you may not see entirely eye to eye, but when you walk out of that room, it has to be a cohesive message.
Yeah.
We have to sing the same song. It has to be well rehearsed. And I actually talked to the leadership team about this, and Ari Weinswig, who's somebody I read a lot of, he's the founder of Zingerman's Deli in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and a whole ton of other businesses that somehow figured out how to print money. Anyway, it talks about you don't need full agreement. You just need consensus. And you don't always have to vote. And it's not always a democracy. It's just that, hey, guess what? If you agree enough, then we're going with this.
Yeah.
You just have to be more than halfway in for me to say, okay, you're in. Because if you're out, you can bring the rest of us out, but you have to give us good reasons why. And that can happen, but you get a time limit to be able to do that. Otherwise, we have to march together, because and it's crazy how much visioning works or helps in an organization. For if I don't tell people where we think the bus is headed, are they going to want to get on it? And are they going to want to contribute to where the bus is going? Now, the bus may change direction, as you said, in a year, a little bit. But if you set a target for 5 years from now with the idea that the people are going to be well looked after, that you're going to pay attention to your finances, and you're going to grow a healthy company, you can set a growth target. But I'm tired of setting numbers at the top and bottom line.
Yeah.
I want to set client retention numbers, and I want to set human numbers for my team's engagement and their retention, because I think that's going to build a great business at this point. But it's Dan and I getting in a room and agreeing on those things, And we don't know, like I said, we don't always see eye to eye, but it's about coming out of the room with the same ideas.
Well, and I think it's interesting with the bus analogy, where there's a lot of business owners that drive the bus, and that's it. You want to be on, get on. You want to get off, get off. I drive this bus, and I'm not saying I'm not even saying it's wrong, because it works for a lot of people, and
it works.
For some businesses it's correct and it's the way to do it. But I know just from knowing you that it's always been important to you that every person on that bus feels like they can say, "Hey, take a left, it'll be faster," and that the bus driver is listening, and that they're making decisions. I mean, the team might not be able to tell you and Dan what to do, but they definitely have a say, and then there'll be a consensus decision around at least major company decisions. I think that's what I've gleaned from knowing you over the years.
In fact, we're working on a revised 3-year vision at the moment. And like all good projects, it's a few months behind. So we're working on it at the moment, but the process has us looking at a collection of documents that we've prepared over the years, working with a coach, a third party on this, looking at those documents, pulling together a list of stuff that's visiony, if you will.
Sure.
And going through, Dan and I are going to go through that list first with the coach, but then we're presenting that to a small team for feedback. Because as I even told the team this at one point, said, it's the old idea of what got you here isn't going to get you there. But at the same time, I told folks, I said, I rolled out of bed 10 years ago and said, I'm going to start a business, and this is what that business is going to be. And I could have written it on a napkin or on my hand, and it would have been enough for a vision. It motivated me. It got me out of bed. Now, as much as what got me out of bed 10 years ago helps you get out of bed today, this business wouldn't be what it is without all of them.
Yeah.
So I want the team to help craft that vision for the next 3 years, so that it becomes more and more about them. Where should we go? What should we do? Where's this bus going? I know you might not be driving the bus, but you're influencing the direction of the bus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always admired that about you guys more than any other agency that I know of, and have inside relationships within. So I know kind of how things work. You guys are always pursuing new projects, bringing in third parties to help construct a better environment, to always make it better for all the people there, not just for top brass or not just for entry level. You're always trying to change it so that the staff is happy, because I think happy people do good work, right? And happy people are more loyal. I mean, and more loyalty means that they don't have one foot out the door half the time, so they're doing half the job.
Yeah. Well, on the backside of the land of partnerships is that, and we go through this a lot, is I think I've got the answer or the best answer. And hey, look what I got. and because you're working in an environment where you want to get some groupthink and you want to help people, and you walk in with an idea, and I opened myself to it. I said, kick the idea. If the baby's ugly, call the baby ugly. You got to tell me why. And even if it's a gut feeling, just tell me why the baby's ugly. So I opened myself up to a lot of ugly baby conversations as a result. Mm-hmm. But I also think that helps the team grow and builds trust. If you're having that communication, I can hand down decision after decision after decision. But I've come to, if you hang around long enough, and you have, or at least around the office, you hear me say, the more I come down from the mountaintop with 2 tablets, the more you fools will just think it's target practice. I may have all the ideas. I got all the ideas. And Adam, you're a guy who's got a ton of ideas. Yep. We get on the phone and we talk about 43 new things that we could start tomorrow.
Yep.
If only we had the time or the money.
That's right.
And they're great. And a lot of them are great ideas, and you can start them. But if they all come from the boss, very few get accepted, adopted, and implemented.
And that has a lot to do with you as a person and maturity. And I agree. So there's nothing I like more to do with a good idea than to beat it up with some other people, because that's the fun part is beating it until you see the holes in it and filling it in. And maybe the idea is a totally new thing by the end of that beatdown. But I find that fun. There's a lot of people out there that they're possessive of ideas as if the idea is themselves. So if you start to kick holes in it, or you start to peel it apart and look at it from different angles, they'll feel slighted, or they feel
Mm-hmm.
they're too connected to an idea, which is not even a thing. It's not even a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a passing thought, and you have to be mature enough to have your idea. This is for like starting a business, doing a new product within a business, whatever it
Yeah.
is. You have to be comfortable enough for your ideas to be ugly babies. You have to be comfortable enough
Yeah.
that they're not. That doesn't make you an ugly baby. You're not your
No.
idea. Your idea is just a thing. And if that thing's going to become something, you have to be comfortable enough to beat it up and have it be bad if it's bad. But as you know, anyone listening right now, or anyone you have this conversation with, they're like, yeah, of course. But how many people do you come across that are actually willing to have their ideas beat up?
I was doing a session internally. I forget exactly what I was teaching internally, because there's the crazy thing, as a leader of an organization, you're looked at as the grand poobah, and you can share wisdom and nuggets or one-on-one, but how do you give your experience back to your team? How do you help your team become better leaders and managers? It's really, really tough to do without third-party influence. So anyway, to your point about getting your ideas beat up, I walked in the room, and it was maybe it was a communication meeting, and I said, hey, show of hands. I said, who appreciates getting feedback? And all these hands shot up. Who appreciates getting constructive feedback? And I said, put those hands down. You're all full of shit. So we hate it. We hate it. As soon as somebody says, hey, Steve, can I tell you about that project? You get crinkly, and you get a little bit defensive. And I do it. We all do it.
Everyone does it by nature. You have to learn to not do it.
You have to set your intention before you ask the question,
to
know that I'm not going to get crinkly about this project when you start talking about it. We all do it. When you give me feedback to tell me that, oh, the presentation that I put together had no theme or flow, and by the way, you hated the font I chose. Great. It comes down to how you message that and how you communicate that. But It's the same thing. You tell me my baby's ugly. This was the best thing in the world. We were going to change the world.
Right.
It's crazy.
20 years ago, when I would put my idea out, I would fight you about how my idea is right. And if you had your ideas, or you were going to pick it apart, I'm going to spend all my energy defending why my idea is good and should stay. Whereas I don't approach it like that at all anymore. Now I approach it as, here it is. I'll help you beat it up. Oh, show me some flaws, kick it a couple times. But I enjoy it as a mental exercise now, where I used to enter it as I'm defending my little sister or something, which was stupid. But you're stupid when you're young.
I have the good fortune of having many friends who are in and about the improv scene here in Chicago. And among those friends is a fellow by the name of Bob Coolhan. Bob lives in New York and is an adjunct at a couple of universities. He has a business. Business Improv is the name of his business. And he invited me to a beta program. It was last month. And we went through a series of Zooms just like this, where he had a dozen people on, and he went through his presentation set, and there were exercises. And we did a lot of talking to ourselves just because of the technology. You can't have 12 people talking at the same time.
Right.
But he would set us up to have conversations in the yes and framework, and to be able to do stuff. So improv is all about yes and. If you yes but a conversation, if you were to tell me your new idea and I say yes but, I'm immediately taking that thing down.
Yeah.
If I yes and, I have the opportunity to build onto it and come up with something better still. And I studied a little bit of improv. And what I learned when I was on stage is when you do the yes, but piece, you end up devolving into a cat fight. And it turns into this weird little dialogue on stage. And it happened every time you saw it and every time I participated. But when you start learning the yes and technique, you have to stop and you have to think. And improv also teaches you to let time pass and let the first thought go before you open your mouth. And if you're really good at it, you can let the second thought go, because the third thought's going to be your best.
Right.
Because your brain is so much faster.
That's terrifying for people, because if they don't get the first idea out, you don't know it, and they need you to know it, and they probably won't have another idea, and they're going to forget this one, and they can't come back, and it's oh my God. And the learning to just be quiet for a minute is hard.
And to yes and build stuff. You can always tear stuff down. I often say it's easier to criticize than it is to create. So cut the creators some slack
For
And
sure.
let's talk about what you appreciate. There's also studies that show it takes 8 acts of appreciation to erase a single criticism.
Yeah.
And you can see numbers all over the place, but I sort of stick to the number 8. So if I tell you your baby's ugly, I better have some backup. I better have, by the way, I think your eyes look really nice today. It's like that kind of thing. You got to work
Your
the
ugly baby
whole
did
thing.
not get your gorgeous eyes.
You'd still get slapped.
Well, yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh,
I want to know also, and back to the business, on how owning a business versus working for somebody else. What has that meant in your life outside of the office? With your family and your friends, and is it nothing? Is it a job's a job? Or has it affected your life in the way that either it takes away or you've orchestrated it as such to make it, enable or embolden the way that you want to live your life? Have you
hmm.
constructed it to reflect things you want in and out of the office, or has it governed, what it's become?
It, both are true. Sometimes the business dictates, and sometimes I get to dictate. I think one of the greatest features, if you will, of having run the business for the last 10 years is I think I missed 2 little league games, and I was able to coach little league, and because you get that latitude, and you can make that decision. It doesn't mean you won't be working at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it
Right.
doesn't mean you don't have to travel to Florida to meet a guy named Adam with a weird mustache. These things happen. They're sort of
That was
the
a good
natural order of
mustache. That was a
things.
really good mustache, by the way.
That's awesome. Um, yeah, it's actually, I met you the first time. Like,
That
oh,
was
that guy's
before Movember was famous too. So there was no like, oh,
right.
this guy's growing a Movember mustache. It was just like, what the hell is this guy doing with a mustache on his face?
That's exactly what it was. It was about 2 days before I think we realized it was that I found out it was a Movember mustache. Like, oh, that makes so much
Oh,
more
so this
sense
dude
now.
doesn't actually take himself seriously with a mustache on his face.
What is this hyper intelligent guy with a ton of personality doing with this goofy ass mustache? Is he?
Stupid porn cop stash on his face.
You just needed the big sunglasses. uh, anyway, there are times when the business absolutely dictates what you're doing. I want. I think I'm reaching a point though, as the kids grow up a little bit and reaching a new chapter and thinking about the next vision for the company, and that I want to steer the company in that direction for the next 3 to 5 years, and I want to grow. I really love this leadership team that we have in place, and I want to help each of those individuals grow into that end. I'm using third party training and mentoring for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I've asked everybody on the leadership team to try and find a coach, somebody who's not Steve, that you trust, who can give you ideas for how to run your part of this business. Because sometimes you just don't want to listen to me because I sound like dad, and I want people to grow, and I want to send people into leadership training. I'll call it a boot camp, but it's not. It lasts a year. And it's a group that I adore, that I'm a part of,
Mm-hmm.
and they have leadership cohorts that start once a year, and there's a lot of industry experts, and there's a formal curriculum for culture and leadership. I call it brainwashing, but it's it's also the same way I like to run the business. And if your business is going to be in your likeness, then you have to be able to help people understand what that means.
Yeah.
And the way we learn business in school is flawed.
Oh, big time. Yeah. Well, school's flawed. School's very, very, very flawed.
Thank you.
And you're 9 times out of 10, you're learning from people who don't know how to do anyway. They're usually academics who are teaching you the academic side, which is only part of the information you need to do anything. And I'm not by any way insulting the academics. We need them, and they do a great thing.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's only one part of the picture. And that's the second time you've brought up mentoring and training. And I think, I never had a good mentor when I was young. And I think that's 99% my fault, because I was the brash young entrepreneur. I mean, I got into this before I was even like 21 years old, into my first company.
Yeah.
and just thinking I was the shit, right? And I knew everything. And I used to have that, like I said, my ideas were great. There's nothing you
Balls
can
of
add
steel,
to it.
baby.
Yeah, shit, balls that clank. And
Look at me. I am truck nuts.
I never had a mentor. I never had, outside of my dad, he's always been a mentor to me because he's just always been.
It's funny. I've never met your dad, but he's immediately who I thought of when you said the word mentor.
Yeah, and he always has been. But he's always been a great deal smarter than me without trying to be, and it's just outwardly apparent how much smarter he is. So you can't argue that. You just can't fight it. But I never had a mentor again until I was, arguably an adult, even if you could call me one of those today. But I got my really first and only ever mentor. Now I would love to find a new one, but my first and ever mentor when I was in my 30s. And he was great. He's unfortunately passed away a little over a year ago. But he was awesome. And I came across him, basically by accident. And he just loved helping entrepreneurs and helping people because he wasn't nice. He wasn't a comfy, cozy, everything's going to be all right. He was kick the shit out of your ideas, and this is going to be a sport, and I'm going to watch you sweat. And he was awesome. He was awesome. And he did a great deal in helping me. It was like other things, I practice meditation now, and I didn't when I was young. Jiu-jitsu, a lot of things that make you really know you suck and you're not good at it.
I've heard of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. And jiu-jitsu lets you know immediately that you suck. And it's going to do that forever. When you're a black belt, you still suck when that other guy strangles you. You suck every day. Meditation, I do it every day, and I realize every day I suck at it, because my thoughts are elsewhere and I'm chasing them down. But that's good. That's part of the process.
It's part of the process.
Realizing all the time that I suck started with at least one of the things, one of the places
that started. Bring you down.
Well, it doesn't though. It doesn't bring me down.
Wait a minute! I just came to realize I'm an ugly baby.
Well, I am an ugly baby. Fact. But I'm just trying to find some decent, cute clothes so people will love me. My mentor his name was William Lawler. He was a professor at a school I went to, and he was just awesome. And he through the way he taught, it let you know that you can get beat up and you can be wrong without it taking away from your value, and it sounds late in life to have those realizations, but I'm just glad that I did at any point,
I'm doing the same thing now, and I'm always looking for people that I can grow from or with. And I actually count you among those people. I think we get together, we talk, we share ideas.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say either of us calls each other a mentor, but in many ways we are, because we can get together in kibitz.
Yeah.
You talk to me about like relationships and stuff and starting a business and being an owner. Being a business owner, small business is a lonely proposition.
It is.
Many, many times. You go out with your friends and the problems are different. You're seeing an entire business. And I'm not knocking them because I've got a lot of friends who've got a lot of really great jobs, and some make plenty more money than me working for somebody else.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's fine.
And if it works for them, great.
Absolutely. I find it hard to talk about jobs because the things that trouble me are how I'm going to make payroll. Mm-hmm. Do I need to extend the credit line?
Yep.
Are we giving a bonus? Are we doing these things? And you can't have those conversations with all of your friends. No. I still want them all to be my friends,
right? But
we've had to change the dialogue over the years. Similar thing happened actually when my son was diagnosed when he was 2-3 years old. Is the dialogue changes among your friends? You actually exchange some friends, because there's people that don't want to be close to, or it's not that they don't want to be close to, they don't know how to be close to a disability, and that has to change. It's a different conversation,
right?
But you shift and you change, and actually, I say a lot that the most important lessons in leadership that I learned come from dealing with children with disabilities, because you have to change the way you operate, because if you don't, it's gonna be ugly.
Yeah. And if you don't, you're part of the problem. You're causing damage. You're doing.
What?
Go ahead.
You're selfish, and your ego gets in the way.
Yeah.
88 in our space, which is autism, 80% of couples get divorced. I want to say it's within 5 years of a diagnosis.
Yeah.
Yeah. I made a pinky swear with my wife and a bunch of other friends that fuck it, we're gonna fight through it all.
Yeah.
You can't get rid of me. And actually, when my wife and I were sitting on the kitchen floor, she'd look at me and laugh because we didn't have any money.
Yeah.
There was barely any coming in. She goes, why the hell would I leave you now? There's nothing to take.
I'm going to wait till you got something.
Yeah, that's right. She said, well, actually, it's funny you say that because last night we were BSing. And she looked at me. She said, what, you mean I could have half of this? I said, enjoy it, baby. You can have most of it. That's fine. Go ahead. Take it all with you. That's crazy.
It is. And I think the kids with special needs, people with special needs, doesn't not just kids, but kids are at least I think most of us have a desire to at least be helpful to kids more than we do adults, whether that's good or bad. But anyway, I know my nephew's autistic as well, so I know firsthand how it can affect families and what it's like. And I also know the amazing differences in progress that awareness and education and knowing what you're up against can bring, and not just for the family, but for the kid themselves. Watching my nephew's journey, even just like the last 2 years, as the diagnosis comes to life, and then you apply the energy and fixes and research and learning what to do. Fixes is wrong word. That's not what I meant by the word. I meant programs and education and how you treat him versus the person next to him, because he's got a different brain and a different reaction. And
it's amazing.
He is a different kid than he was 2 years ago, and it's magnificent. Right. I just want to dance for joy every time I see him, because he's so a different version of himself, and he's a more emboldened, empowered, functional version of himself, and he can see it too, because they're very smart, right? And he can see it, and he can be aware of it, and he can enjoy that, and that's just nice to watch.
It's amazing to watch. My dream was, when he was diagnosed, that one day I would see him off to college, and to see the kid now looking at schools, it's heartwarming.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine how heartwarming that is.
He wants to go to school. A kid that used to not he was always verbal, but he wouldn't talk to you. He wouldn't pay attention to you. You weren't there. He was talking. I don't know about what, but he was talking. And from a kid who used to flap and spin, as they say in the space, and line up his toys, and to a kid who's looking at schools and is making a conscious decision about what college he wants to go to. It's just it's weird. I want it to be rewarding. But it's just parenting,
right?
At some level.
But there's no reason parenting can't be rewarding. I mean, that's the whole point of it.
Yeah, I'll take that. That's a fine criticism.
My parenting is the most important job I have. This stuff. Right. This stuff's not.
Well, and you're right. You're right. You know what? I'm gonna go back on that. It should be rewarding. It is parenting. But there's those proud parent moments that say, you know what, this is pretty cool. And give yourself a little hug once in a while to say, I did okay as a parent.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to take credit for having a good year at BFO, or you do a good job by a client, and you're going to celebrate that, and you can't celebrate your kid doing well, I mean, that's I think that's the wrong attitude. Yeah. If you're an active parent, then you're working on that kid. That kid's a project. Yeah. It's never going to end.
That's true. It's true. That's very, very true.
And I love when my kids surprise me, where they're just they just do stuff that, sometimes as a parent, you can think of them as little puppets and they just do what you say, but they're not. They're little individuals. And when you see that come out undeniably, it's just amazing to wow.
As they continue to grow too, and you get to see those little pieces of their personality start shaping up. It's incredible.
And when you see them, at least for me, when you see them doing or becoming strong in areas that you were weak, or things that made you feel nervous when you were a kid, so you didn't explore, and you've got your kid being bold in those areas. I love seeing that, because it's so, I just look at so many doors that they're going to have open to them that I didn't, just out of either not having the anxiety or fear over a certain type of thing, or either that, or them having the balls to overcome it, where I didn't. Sure. It's just I love seeing that
growth mindset in the kids, seeing them learn and figure things out, and then take some of those chances themselves.
And I think a lot of that is not that we get credit for it, but I think we enable it in parents, with parenting, that you can raise a kid that's afraid to do anything, and you can raise a kid that's going to be ready to take on the world. And to a degree, it's going to come down to who they are as a person, whether they're fearful or they're risk takers or what they are. But you certainly have an influence on it as a parent, whether or not they're gonna be that way. So I think that's where I find the reward in it, is maybe something they used to stumble with, and you coach them around it, and a year later you've got them thriving in something. It's just I really like to have those moments.
It's, you know what, take that back to business, and those are the most rewarding moments in business too, is when you see somebody else, whether you've tutored them, mentored them or not, but you see the elevator is going up another floor because they've gained the knowledge and experience
Yeah.
to make those decisions, and you've given them the room. A good friend of mine who you met, Anise Kavanaugh, said, give somebody a very, very large container to operate in. You know what you expect of them, but give them a container that's larger than your expectations, and watch them grow into it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And I think it goes back to what you were just saying about having people, where I think as a business owner, you got to be pretty comfortable in your vulnerabilities and talking. Like you were saying, you and I, we talk all the time and go over ideas. And I agree. And it's very helpful for me, where I guess I was just not, it was a linguistic thing. With mentor, I view Professor Lawler as a mentor because he didn't get anything from me. He was an older guy who had a lot of answers and really just knew the right questions, even if he didn't have answers. And he would give the time. He was always giving, because he didn't have a business. He was ready for retirement. As he said it, his landing gear was out. There's nothing he was chasing. I was always chasing. So that's no less valuable than my relationships with you. But we're both chasing. We're both active.
Yeah.
That's where it's different. Where I can help you, you can help me. We can evolve things together. I guess that's where to me, it's not mentor. It's more of like a partner. It's more of it's an ongoing
That's a
thing.
really, really cool analogy for that his landing gear was out.
Yeah, I thought so too. I've never forgot it.
I've got a mentor like that, Tom Walter, and he's a guy that he's the reason, part of the reason I always wanted to run the business a certain way, with a certain amount of credit and respect and trust in the employees versus the command and control style. And Tom was the person who set me on that path. And he's still a guy that if I've got questions or problems, I can still reach out. But he's a guy now who's his landing gear's out. You're absolutely right. Just thinking about that. And then you do. I thrive on relationships like ours and those that I have with a few other people who are both still in the race. We're still at it. We're still pushing, because you can share ideas. You're like, oh wait, you handled that what way? It's not the wise old sage, but there are plenty of sage comments that you make that I go, I might have to use that.
Yeah, for sure. And just watching some of those people who are 20 years ahead and have made good decisions and have gotten to a good place. There's one, actually, a guy I'm having on the podcast. He's an old client of mine, and through being the client, he was always mentor-ish. He's a really bright guy, really focused guy, and I liked his style. He owned a company called the Wellness Corporation, and they were like an ERP. They sold in, helping the employees of companies through HR and that stuff. And he was a nurse before he founded that, but he also has a charity that's still going. So he sold the wellness company off a few years ago, and he's also got a charity out in Guatemala that he still runs, where they built a hospital for midwives, and he got malaria while he's out there. He's out there every year helping and nursing, and like he's the real deal. Not just like he raises a bunch of funds, then he goes out there and he's swinging hammers and building hospitals. And this is a part of the world where there's still death squads, and you're not safe in Guatemala. Wow. There's things coming through, and just because you're American doesn't mean that I have my rights. Well, not today, you don't, buddy. And so I guess what I'm getting at is he's a ballsy guy who's always seems to know where he's heading, and so I love picking his brain. And he's retired now, and his landing gear's out, except for he still does the charity. So I'm really, really excited to have him on the podcast and talk to him about what he's doing now with all that focus, because I know the focus doesn't go somewhere. You're still going to have it, so it's just not on the company. Where is it now? And I can't wait to find the answer.
Nice. I like it a lot.
Me too. Last thing I wanted to kind of ask you that I like to talk about is, when you're dreaming of owning a business and you got your grand plans and you're forming the company, what what over the 10 years has hit you off guard? Like, what's the holy shit? I didn't see that coming. What's the lesson that you would get that you didn't, that's not the sexy lesson or the one that everybody knows ahead of time?
It's I mean, in some ways, it's all of it. You go back to our talk of having balls of steel when you're younger, and thinking you know it all. I think the thing that's caught me off guard probably the most is I think about Steve 15, 20 years ago, is that what you think is going to work and succeed isn't. And as long as you're willing to adapt and change, you can still succeed. And I think that one of the key lessons in business, there's two things that I sort of that roll through my head, and I can also share a couple of Steveisms along the way too. But two things that roll through my head is some advice a great friend of mine gave me once. She said, "What's the worst thing that happens? You get a fucking job." So there's that piece, and the other one is that if we don't change, we die. And you see businesses all the time that refuse to change, or let the upstart get ahead of them and relied on their book of business and the recurring revenues, and slowly shrank. And then they tried to change too late, or they tried to think that it really wasn't a competitive place. So those are more the ahas, is that you grow and you get process and you get change and you get these things. But you have to keep evolving. If you hunker down and you keep doing the same thing, the market and the world are going to pass you by.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to be open to the change, and it's scary. It's scary.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time to learn to embrace it. Like the way I look at it is anything we're doing good now or any success we've had is despite me, because the balls that clank years, I did a lot of shit wrong, just wrong, but I did it with just such force that I kicked open doors
And to answer your question then more specifically after hearing that, is that when you say what was the aha was that my genius plan wasn't what got us here. It was the grit and the hard work. And there are no, I like to say there are no bad ideas, but failed execution or poor execution.
Yeah.
And yes, there are some bad ideas, don't get me wrong, but it's more that if you've got the willpower and you've got the desire and you can push forward, and people have made money in crazy ways and have found success and found their own personal harmony, even without money, in crazy ways. And to look at the way some of these people have found a way to live their lives the way they want.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things they do, it's unfathomable.
Yep.
How some of these people find their happiness.
Yep.
And I guess it's that idea is that Steve 20 years ago, when he was just sitting in his attic dreaming about all these businesses, wasn't as crazy as he thought he was.
Yeah. He just didn't know yet what was going to happen.
Yeah.
It's it's a fun, interesting ride.
It's not for everybody.
No, it's not. And everyone's is different, right? Like I take a lot of time away from the business. In other words, I orchestrate it so that, similar to you, I don't miss hockey games. I don't miss jiu-jitsu with my kids, or snowboarding, or like any of the stuff they're into. I'm there doing it with them, and we're into it together. And I want to do that until they don't want me there, right? Because that's part of how I want to be as a dad. And it's selfish too. Awesome. I want to be there because I want every minute I can have with them until they don't want me around, And my business enables me to do that a lot more than people that have a 9-to-5. A lot of people, a 9-to-5 nowadays is a 7 to 7. And that's just reality, take commuting and the demands of a job in. That's what it gives me. And there's one, you had mentioned a quote that is close to you, and one that's close to me that I always think about is that no amount of money ever bought a moment in time. And, I have friends that make, like you said, I have friends that make a good deal more money than me, but they might be happy. I'm not even judging it. But they're not around as much. And that might be good for them in their situation. But the way I want it, I would gladly opt for the less money to have the more time and the flexibility. It's just it's how I like to be paid. I like to be paid in time.
I met a local entrepreneur. He's very, very successful. In fact, he's written about in Bo Burlingham's book, Small Giants, and got to spend some time with him recently. And he talked about his evolution as a human and an entrepreneur. And the way it worked out, he said, when I was 30 years old, I wanted to take over the world. When I was 40, I thought I'd own it. And when I realized I didn't own it, I had to reflect and ask myself when enough was enough. And I decided I wanted to spend time with my family. I wanted to take care of my employees. I wanted to have a legacy that wasn't about how much money I had. He goes, listen, now I've got plenty of money. He goes, I've enough money for me. My the business is great. I've got wonderful employees. I've got a wonderful family. He said, I had to make the conscious decision at some point in time. He said, I think he was like a 30 under 30 or 40 under 40 in one of these magazines. And he says, and I thought I was going to take over the world. And then he goes, another 10 years passed and I hadn't quite taken it over. I was still making good money. And I had to ask myself what I wanted to be. Did I want to be in that lane or did I want to be in this lane? And I created this lane for myself.
Yeah.
It was a really cool story.
And you don't always have to stay in the same lane. You might want a different lane 10 years after. Yeah. Like we're saying, you're not the same person 10 years later. So whatever lane is right now might not be the lane you see yourself in or that you're going to look back and know that you would have been in later. I think it all goes back to trying to make it work for the way you want to live. And the way you want to live, you might love work. You might be a workaholic, and that might be fine. You might only be happy with an 80-hour work week and grinding. Awesome, more power to you. Then involve that in the way that you do things. It's not that there's one right way. It's that there isn't one right way. There's people that have made it. There's people that are billionaires from making social media networks and trash. You can make the way. Right. Just figure out what's going to work for you and how if you can be happy while you do it. Meaning fulfilled, not meaning rich, not meaning have it easy, meaning fulfilled. You get meaning out of your work, you get meaning out of your day, and it provides you, meaning in your life. And I think that that's a place to build from.
Agreed. Very well said.
And on that note, we're like an hour and a half in, so I want to try to respect your time. I hear your phone starting to go off. There's probably people at your door.
And the time of your listeners who's going to listen to a 90-minute podcast.
You'd be surprised. People like to listen. It's I do. I listen to long podcasts too. I like it because you get to actually have a conversation. If this was 15 minutes long, we would have hit bullet points on your business, and we wouldn't have hit any of the interesting stuff that makes you a person.
And there would have been. The proportion of snarky remarks in that 15 minutes would have gone way high too.
Yeah, and there would have been buzzwords. It would have been filler because you when you're trying to race for a clock, then you end up without reality. You end up with default modes, like you do in a meeting or like you do in a pitch, and you're not getting that real person. But when you sit here for an hour and a half, and the half an hour we spent before we started recording, you end up just having a conversation, and that's what. I think people lack that in their life today, is having conversations. I mean, aside from doing this podcast, I don't often have a 1 or 2 hour long conversation without phones and emails and interruptions and people. And, it's really, I really enjoy it just from a creative outlet, because I get to have long human conversations with interesting people. And it's not normal in life anymore.
Did you play Words with Friends when it became really popular?
No, I never got into any games. My kids hate me for it.
Good. So Words with Friends became really popular in Facebook game, and I started playing Words with Friends with several people. And you end up having, some people have dozens of games going at any one time with their friends and with people all over the world. And I asked myself, I said, do I want to live on this device? I said, no, I want to live in the real world. And I made a statement at one point. I said, why are we playing Words with Friends when we can be having beers with friends?
Yeah. Valid.
And we don't do it enough.
Yep.
Get out and see people.
I couldn't agree more. And I could pretend like I am good and responsible, but I'm not. I try to be. I even have an alarm in my phone every day that says put your phone away at 5, because that's when I play with my kids until they go to bed. But it doesn't happen every day, because if I need the phone, if I'm expecting something to come in, then the phone stays in my pocket, and I'm a victim to it. And I hate that part, but it's also a reality, and it's a balance of knowing, like, the way life is now involves these devices, but trying to learn how to have some kind of boundary between you and it. So it's not governing when you look at it. You are.
Yep.
And I'm not saying I'm in full control of that, because sometimes I find myself just lost, scrolling and killing time. And why the...
Some days you're the baby, some days you're the diaper.
So true. It's so true. And I've caught myself, you wake up 20 minutes later on the phone, you're like, what did I just do at that time? That was so stupid. I can't take it back. And but I'll do it again next week. It's going to happen again. It's just a matter of trying to manage it.
When movie theaters were popular, the amount of time we wasted with our friends going to awful movies.
Yeah.
Although they're memories. That's the thing, is that time spent makes memories, even if the movie was horrible. I won't get that time back.
Right.
You've stolen 2 hours of my life.
And even if it was a passive experience where you're both watching a movie, you and your friends are there together, you were in the lobby, you were getting your popcorn, you bought your tickets, you met out front, in the cold or the hot. There's an experience that went around, that went with it, that came along with it. When you're just...
We can do that here. Just do me a favor. Let's connect, and let's do this for another 3 hours.
Yeah, and then let's go onto Twitter and fight some trolls and get all pissed off and
hide behind the keyboard and make snarky comments. I started reading. I won't go into it. We got to get off of this thing, but
right.
I'll say it. I'll say it quickly. It drives me crazy reading Reddit. I want to get some information, and I'm attracted to some of the information in the news, but the way people hide behind their keyboards and simply troll people and they light bombs and throw them over.
Yep.
Just calling, it's just horrible.
It is.
It's a horrible show of humanity.
It is. And if you start to look into it and check out the people that are throwing those bombs, and you look closer at them, you see that they're spending their day doing it. This is what fuels them.
Right.
Imagine the misery locked inside their head, where their whole day is, fuck this guy, I'm going to ruin what he's doing.
Those are the people that don't just sneak ahead of you when crossing the street. They elbow you or something.
Yeah.
I don't know, but actually, no, it's crazy. I don't know that they do that. I think they hide behind their keyboards, and I don't think they're probably a little bit of a hermit, socially anyway. But out in public, they're probably not anything like that.
Of course they're not. Because nobody's like that. I mean, how many people have you met face to face that's like that? Nobody.
Nobody.
They're
once in a while, you meet that one person. Oh man, that person should stay online.
And they're usually drunk. But sometimes you get that sober asshole. I mean, they're out there. But most people I meet are nice people. Just like I almost never meet someone who's on the left or on the right. The people that the only voices you can hear online, I don't meet them. I don't know those people. The Trump or die or the Trump must die. There's two camps. And I don't know. I don't know those people.
I know a couple.
Well, there's always a few, but
they're
fun to invite to parties.
If you remember that they wear it, it's a badge of honor on either side. But you're right. Most people you meet
virtue signaling.
They're not the trolls.
No.
They're not the trolls you meet online. They would never say those things in person.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird. It pains me to read some of that stuff. And I hope that people just ignore it, but it's just crazy.
Yeah, and some people get caught up in it, and then they get all worked up and emotional, and it ruins their day. And Jesus,
and then they try to ruin my day.
Right, and then they're ruining my day, and that's unacceptable.
I can't have that. You can't have that.
No,
my day should be 2/3 self-amusement. If I can't do that, I haven't had a good day.
Right. On that note, let's get to some self-amusement. I'm going to play the fancy outro music, and off we go.